Hey, today we're going to talk about 5.10, Impacts of Urbanization. Take a moment, check out the enduring understanding, look at the learning objective, pause the video, review the essential knowledge, and set up your Cornell notes. So urbanization, just to define the word, is when people move into a city from rural areas. Now, that's also involves converting the landscape to accommodate these people, which would involve cutting down the trees, which is also going to involve removing a lot of soil and potentially draining a lot of wetlands. So all of these are going to have their overall impact, and as you probably can predict, that most of them are not good. So over the past 50 years, 75 years, we've actually increased the amount of urban population, and in, I believe, 2009, the number of people globally living in urban environments has surpassed the amount of people living in rural environments. And this is just going to continue to increase. The last census numbers just came out, and the urban population in the United States has actually increased as well, which has ramifications for political purposes and also for funding of various projects. So urbanization, the reason why people shifted from an agrarian to an industrial society is because of employment opportunities. People moved into cities because there were more jobs there, and you could actually make more money and maybe be able to afford to buy the products that you would be growing on your own. So shifting away from an agricultural society meant that people could buy the products instead of growing them. But however, we generated a lot more waste, which also increased the amount of greenhouse gases, contributing to climate change and overall biodiversity loss. Additionally, we destroyed a lot of habitat, which in and of itself is a major contributor to biodiversity loss. And we also had to construct a lot of infrastructure. Infrastructure is things like transportation, constructing buildings, healthcare, all of these things that kind of help a society to work and work with other portions of the society behind the scenes. The transportation and the building construction really impacted the hydrology of these environments, which overall can contribute to biodiversity loss. Okay, urban sprawl is the movement of people from the center of an urban area to the suburbs and the creation of suburbs. And this started in the 1950s. After World War II, automobile use increased, and also there was a construction of interstate highways following the Interstate Highway Act that was passed in the 1950s. Additionally, the land was really cheap outside of urban areas, so they expanded from the urban area into the suburban areas by reclaiming some rural areas. This led to urban blight, and that was the overall degradation of urban areas, kind of when center parts of cities or the downtown areas or urban areas become a little bit more disheveled. And this led to white flight, which it's a term that was used to describe the moving out of people of higher socioeconomic levels. Typically, in this case, in the United States, was white people moving out into the suburbs. And when that happens, I'll describe that in a moment. But also with urban sprawl, a lot more people are driving to and from their jobs. The jobs pretty much predominantly remained in the city. It's just that people moved out to the suburbs and were driving back and forth to their jobs. This led to an increase in greenhouse gases through all the fossil fuel combustion, and that leads to climate change and eventually biodiversity loss. The urban sprawl also consumed a lot more resources because you had to construct a lot more buildings. You also had to build a lot more cars, build a lot more highways, which led to habitat destruction, eventually biodiversity loss. So this urban blight means that there was a population shift from the urban areas out into the suburban areas. When this happened, there was less tax revenue inside these center cities, With less tax revenue means that you're going to have fewer and fewer services. So now the roads aren't getting repaired, the schools aren't getting as much funding because now a lot of the money's going out to the suburbs where a lot more population, where you see a lot more population centers increasing. So in other words, these neighborhoods in the urban areas started to decline. And this decline in the urban areas meant that there was this, and this is where white flight comes into play, where a lot of people are moving out into the suburbs. So this is an example of a positive feedback loop, because as this continues, as the population shift moves out to the suburbs, or as a population shifts out to the suburbs, you get an overall degradation of this urban environment. And one good example in the 20th century was the city of Detroit. When I was a kid, Detroit had like well over 1 million people, the actual city of Detroit. And now the population of Detroit might be between 700 and 800,000. So the population of Detroit, a lot of people have fled the urban area of Detroit and moved out to the suburbs, and that has caused a degradation in the city of Detroit. There's other examples, but that's just one that comes to mind right now. So how does this impact hydrology? So before, in a rural setting, you're going to have 40% of the water is going to, evaporate or transpire. 10% of the water is going to run off, and you're going to have about half of the water, 50%, is going to infiltrate into the ground and basically be recharging the aquifers. Now, once you construct everything, all of this infrastructure in a city, you're going to be shifting that. So now you're going to still have, a good portion evaporating or transpiring. In this case, more of it's going to be evaporating because you have a lot fewer trees. You have a huge increase in the amount of runoff, went from 10% to 55%. And you have a huge decrease in the amount of water that infiltrates. So the groundwater recharge will be greatly reduced in urban environments. So there are other impacts that we will be discussing in future videos, but this is an overview. For FRQ practice, I would like you to describe one possible solution to urban sprawl and identify a potential economic consequence to this solution. Okay, I thank you for your attention. I hope that this was informative, and I will see you soon.